Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 628 for the 29th of January. And Brian, I saw a barrage of emails rolling in. I'm
Yes.
out.
I'm out. I'm out.
Hey, you kids, get off our lawn. So this is the pre-show. For those that don't know, this is the time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say extremely outrageous things. So Bill Murray says, what did he say? He's got to go meet a man about a dog.
Some sort of hotel deal.
I think he's buying Enron. And now Kim is sick. She apparently is not feeling well tonight, so she is out.
And what's up with Rick Knabb not wanting to be on the show because it's too late? Didn't he know what time the show was before he agreed to be on here?
Rick, I haven't slept since 1973.
Sleep is for sissies.
Can you see it in these red eyes? It's okay. So we got Dr. Shepard on here. That'll be cool. No, I am out because of a big dinner interview for a new potential employee for our hotel company. Apparently it's not you or me, Brian. We didn't get the job offer.
I guess not.
No. So maybe it's just me, you, and Marshall.
Well, Rick just sent in a POW, so means he's probably going to join us.
And maybe, we had Nate Johnson last week. That was kind of a cheap thrill. We haven't had Nate in a while. It's good to have him back.
I put Nate and cheap in the same sentence.
Well, that's
Hey, we got to give him grief, right?
Yeah, we do. That's what we do here. And Aubrey should be here. Maybe Kevin will be here. I don't think he was on last week. The bottom line is we never know who shows up on this program. We just do it. I have to show up because I'm the guy with the ball. And by the way, I figured out the deal. Last week the Bluetooth.
Yeah, what happened with that?
Unavailable on this computer, which is just very odd. And I did some Google foo and checked around, and it just said delete this Bluetooth plist file.
Yep.
So did that do it? Yep. Deleted the Bluetooth plist file, and it came right back up fine. So I have these little wireless things going tonight. Things happen.
Yep. You look much better without wires.
Yeah. When you get used to not having them, it's kind of like this distracting when you got them on. So I think we're good to go here. But Brian, you going to buy
what
for your home?
Buy what?
AirPod.
No, I'm scared to death of these things. I'm afraid they're going to get hacked.
Big brother is always listening.
Yeah.
What can?
Did you hear what happened to? You remember Ainsley, one of our producers? Yes. Did you hear what happened to her over Christmas?
No.
She woke up and there was music playing, and they have a young daughter, and so she said, "Where'd the music come from?" And the daughter responded, "I just said, Alexa, play Christmas music."
Wow. No, we do not have Alexa, Google Home, AirPod. We don't have any of that. My position is that I can pretty much do that on these doodads I have here. And I can talk to Google Assistant on any device I've got here in front of me. I can talk with Siri. I can have it play music. Now, true that the speakers are not the same quality.
Yeah,
is one of these things, and everybody says the quality is great, but I'm working in a TV station, and man, we're typically in a studio or in here doing WeatherBrains, and you just can't have music playing out of speakers. So
yeah, I used Siri over the weekend. I was in Troy, and I had breakfast at the hotel, and I said, Siri, what's the temperature outside in Troy, Alabama? And you're going to love the response. I quote, "Brr, it's 55 degrees."
Wow.
I was anticipating it's 55 degrees. I wasn't anticipating the commentary of "burr."
Wow.
Oh.
The only thing I like on the Google, let get jokes here. Hang on here. Let's try. Let's try this in real time here. You ready?
Oh, you're gonna. So you're brave.
This could be dangerous.
It can be.
Tell me a joke. Tell me a joke.
This might make you laugh. Did you hear the one about the chicken crossing the road? It was poultry in motion.
Ah.
Tell me another one.
What happens when a frog's car breaks? It gets towed.
Toad. T-O-A-D. Get it?
Yes. You don't have to spell it. I get it. So I have a burning question.
Yes.
How was lunch?
It was good.
You don't have to say anything more. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. Now we live in interesting times. So far it's just me and you. Let me see if I can get Marshall on this thing.
Well, with
there, a nice thing about having him on, I know how to get him on the show here, so that makes it easy. We need to talk about UGA, University of Georgia. Now we got Marshall on here. Brian, have you ever been to the University of Georgia?
I don't think I have. I don't think I've been to Athens, Georgia.
Oh yeah, Dr. Shepard.
Hey guys, how are you, James?
Wait, have you got a chroma key wall here? Well, wow.
Something the Weather Channel gave me in the house. It's still a work in progress. I do some call in for them every now and then on Wednesdays. So they wanted a little backing, so they came and put one in the house. We're still trying to figure it out because it's a little flimsy.
That's kind of like awesome.
Yeah, they wanted something that looks smart with books, but it's just a screen. It's just a vinyl panel. It's
it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
So Rick, do you have any leather-bound books in your home?
No, but do you like my fake background? It's designed to look like a spare bedroom.
I've even got some front lighting. I've got a front lighting thing that they gave me too.
No, you look good, man. It's a pro-looking set there.
Yeah, it's all okay. It needs some work. They're going to come put another one in, but we're going with this one for now.
Wow. So, no, but Brian, do you have any leather-bound books, and does your home smell of rich mahogany?
No, no on both counts. But I do have an original copy dated 1957 of the Glossary of Meteorology.
Nice.
Ooh.
I've seen that in the AMS headquarters. If you go to AMS headquarters, they've got a library room, and they've got some of the original AMS journals dating back to like the 1800s. It's amazing.
Wow.
Will they let anybody just walk in there? Because I go to Boston every year, and I go by 45 Beacon Street.
Yeah, you could go. I'm sure you could, James. You're a CBM.
Yeah, I don't know what the policy is of letting people in there. I mean, I would love to just knock on the door and say hi and just
next time you're there. I mean, because it's one of the most. There's a lot of history to the building. It's where the first I think waltz was ever performed in America is in that building.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's quite a bit of history to it, the building. But no, I just shoot Keith Sider or someone an email and let them know you're there, because it is a lot. But. Yeah,
it's like the first week in August, we are always there. And Kevin's a Boston guy. Kevin, you ever been to the AMS headquarters on Beacon Street?
No, but I've been to Beacon Street.
45 Beacon Street, and it's right up the street from Cheers, too.
Yep.
Yes, the Bull and Finch Pub.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Kevin, check your mic.
It looks nothing like Cheers on the inside.
I know. I've been there. Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Kevin, check your mic. I think you're on your laptop mic instead of your fancy external mic.
Give me a minute, please.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to be helpful.
No, I'm sorry.
He's cranky tonight, James.
No, it
I
says
like
Yeti.
Well, tap that thing. Yeah, you're good. You're good. It was just far away.
Show title.
tap that thing. Let's get this thing started since we're here, because we are all here. Let me record channel 1.
Gang's all here.
And channel 2.
And look who's back from Mexico.
Yep, we got all kind of questions here coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains episode number 628. This is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for January 29th, 2018. And most of the gang is all here tonight. And look who's back. The lovely Aubrey Urbanowicz is back from her trip to the beaches, the tropical beaches of Mexico. How was it?
It was pretty darn fantastic.
How fantastic. I want to hear.
It was amazing. It was warm. I laid out on the beach more than I ever have in my life.
But you were soaking up the books.
I was.
She's not going to tell us about it.
I was. I ran out of books. I misjudged because last year I forgot we only went for a couple of days, but this year we went for a full week. So I only brought 3 books and I was done with the first one on day 1. So.
Wow. The real question is, and it harkens back to a previous show title, is did you use the bail money?
I am not at liberty to say.
One day in time you'll be able to tell us, but not
Possibly,
right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a yes, I think.
Yeah, it's not a no, is it?
How long did you stay down there?
We were there for a week. And we were lucky enough to kind of, Delta had ended up switching some of our flights. So I went to rebook it since they changed things. So when we ended up getting in, it was like at noon on Saturday. And when we left, we had like a 5 o'clock flight out. So we ended up kind of getting even our travel days a decent part of the day, which was glorious.
Wonderful.
Well, let's see who else. Kevin, where are you tonight? You're in a super secret place, the lobby.
I figured I'd go to a different place because I'm so thrilled to be on the Weather Geeks program with Dr. Marshall Shepard. No, wait a minute. That's not right. No, I'm in the lobby again. I get to stay because our weekend guy, Scott Cook, is going to do the Fox show. It's probably a little echoey in here, but it's the only place where I can plug in and get Wi-Fi in the building other than in my area.
Is that a security camera over your head up there? I see.
I'm going to say yes. I should probably wave there. And the general manager will come to me tomorrow and go, "What were you doing sitting in the lobby?" And I'll have to say, "I was on the Weather Geeks program with Marshall Shepard."
With Marshall Shepard. There you go. I mean, that's an immediate excuse that works every time. Rick Smith is the WCM of the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. Rick, how are you, sir? And by the way, let me just say this. I want to debrief you and Marshall on AMS because we've not had time to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So just I'm warning you, Rick, be crawling up in your brain. We're going to debrief you here.
Oh, that's I've had that done before, and it's not always pleasant. But
wow,
there's a show title.
There's your show title. Yeah. By the way, I looked it up. WeatherBrains 535 is I didn't use the bail money for anyone who didn't.
535. All right. And what are we on tonight?
628.
628.
All right, so maybe at 6:35 I'll release some details.
Wow.
I'll have to look at the fine print.
Go ahead,
Rick. What were
Rick.
you doing today? I saw some pictures of you speaking somewhere. It looks like you're down there at the National Weather Center speaking to somebody today.
yeah, one of the cool things about being in that building is getting to speak to students. And Kevin Claysel's got one of the coolest university classes I've ever heard of. It's all about decision support, and he has all these guest speakers come in from last week. There was somebody there who's working the Super Bowl. Next week, somebody's coming in that handles weather for Daytona. And I was just to fill in because they had nobody else to talk today, I think, or something. So
It
Hey,
sounds
that's
like
what I'm doing on WeatherBrains today.
Yeah. He's just copying this show. It sounds like, Rick.
well, I didn't say that, but no, it was cool. It was a cool class, and and got to talk a little bit about what the Weather Service does and decision support and things like that. So yeah, always fun.
Awesome. Well, let's bring in Dr. Marshall Shepard. He's one of my heroes. He is the director of the University of Georgia's Atmospheric Sciences program, host of Weather Geeks on the Weather Channel, internationally beloved. Wait, that's Brian Peters. It's the internationally beloved meteorologist. But Marshall, and for those that are listening, you can't see this awesome set he has at his house that the Weather Channel has put in there. Wow. Is that awesome or what?
Hey, we do a Weather Geek Wednesday, and I guess they got tired of looking at my blank wall with Atlanta Braves portrait up there. So we need something that gives you a little backing. So yeah, it's good to be here. I'm in a meeting in Atlanta today, and I get an email from Bill Murray saying, "Hey, can you come on WeatherBrains tonight?" I was like, "Actually, I can." So happy to be here.
Fantastic.
So let's jump right into this debrief thing. Now, Marshall, for those that don't know, was the president of the American Meteorological Society in 2013. And for those of us that could not attend, we could probably do 10 shows on the AMS. But Dr. Shepard, just some highlights. Let's just toss it to you. You came away with maybe 5 highlights. What 5 would you select?
Yeah, the first highlight is the student conference that starts off the week, just continues to grow. They break records every year. I think they broke the record again, over 700 students. I'm a little worried, and we can talk about this later, because we got to find jobs for all these people. Man, I still worry about this oversaturation a little bit in our field, but the students are just there and they're lively. Richard Alley, I'm not going to say the word because I don't want to get the bell, but he gave a great talk. Richard Alley is one of the best speakers out there. If you never heard him, from Penn State University. He kicked off the week on Sunday. Let me just say this, James, and everyone on the Weather Brains panel. This was the meeting for Matt Parker, who was the former president of the AMS. Matt was a good friend of mine. Matt has stayed in my home. He took me to the Masters tournament. He was a big Masters fan. For those that don't know, he was sitting president of AMS and then died an untimely death. And it was just, all of us were just shocked by that. But everyone picked up the pieces and made sure this meeting was to his standards. It was a meeting about communication of weather, and I think that's something that you all appreciate on this podcast. So Richard Alley set the tone. I want to say that the thing that every single person was talking about from this particular meeting was the town hall on the hurricane season. And I don't know, Rick, if you were there for that and can add anything to it, but man, that was amazing. We had Jeff Linder from the Houston Water District, or whatever his particular flood district, Ada Monzon, who had the entire thousands of people in the same room in tears because she kind of laid out what's going on still in Puerto Rico. We had FEMA there. We had Louis Icciolini from the Weather Service talking about their successes with the forecast. Jamie Rohn talking about the successes of the storm surge prediction models that now are in place. And there's one other, Carrie Emanuel as well. So that was arguably the best town hall at an AMS I've seen, hands down. And I think if you talk to anyone that was there, I think they would sort of echo that. So that was also a big highlight. And of course, everything else at AMS. Hey, one of the big highlights, James, I missed you. The broadcasters were there. It is very rare to have the AMS broadcast conference at the annual meeting. And so I was actually hoping you were going to be there, but it's always nice to have that. We honored Bob Ryan. Bob Ryan's the first broadcast meteorologist to have an AMS symposium in his name. And that was at the AMS this year too.
Yeah, Bob is a legend. And yeah, I want to ask you about that because traditionally the AMS broadcast gathering is in the summer.
Yes.
What prompted the change to bring it into the annual meeting like that?
Absolutely. Matt Parker, who I just mentioned, the past president who's now deceased, he had this theme for the meeting, communication. And he said, the best communicators in our field are our broadcast colleagues. So he said, I really would like them there this year. So he, worked with Maureen McCann and various others, made it happen. And I know AMS falls at a time where it's not always great for broadcasters because of sweeps and scheduling, all of that type of thing. But, we've had a few times in the past where it's there. I don't know if any of you were in, I think it was San Antonio several years ago. This was the infamous AMS meeting with the ice storm, where literally half the people couldn't make it to San Antonio because there was an ice storm. But that was, I believe, I can't remember how long ago it was, but the broadcasters came together at that meeting as well. So every now and then there is an attempt to do it. And frankly, I think it's a good thing, because I know there's been talk I've talked to broadcast colleagues when I was president, and they often shared with me this feeling of isolation at times from the broader AMS. And I said, well, one of the reasons is because you meet separately, and I understand the reasons why you do, but I think every now and then coming together for those meetings is good. And by the way, it's not just the broadcasters that have separate meetings. I mean, there are several other sectors of AMS, like the Hurricane Group and the Radar Conference. They're always separate as well, but I thought it worked out well.
So, Marshall, one of the things that we heard, the thing had started a day or two by the time we did this show that week, and we were watching things go by that it seemed like the buzzword was messaging. There's messaging. What's the messaging? We have a messaging problem. How do we fix the messaging? How do we do better messaging? Can you flesh that out for us?
Yeah, that was, again, and that just sort of, one of the things are good or bad. Some people criticize it, but AMS actually for each annual meeting has a theme. And Matt's theme that he set was communication and messaging. When I was president, my theme was weather and climate in the urban environment. Next year's theme in Phoenix, Arizona, Roger Wakamoto will be the president. He's actually serving essentially 2 terms. He's finishing out Matt's term. His theme is extreme weather. So this year, the theme was messaging, and it's centered around all of the various things that you all talk about quite a bit on this show and whatnot, which is how do we get the forecast, if you will, over the finish line. I mean, we're pretty good with our radars and models and GOES-R satellites and those types of things now, but people are still, as James, you always talk about, people still die from these storms. People still sat there like, gee, I didn't think Hurricane Harvey was going to be that bad, even though, gosh, I was writing in Forbes about the fact that it was going to be 4 feet of rain a week before the event, and yet you still had people saying, I just didn't think it was going to be that bad. And so, as you all know, we've got this sort of disconnect between sort of perception and reality and messaging. And so I think that there was a lot of discussion at AMS about that. Roger's meeting next year in Phoenix will kind of focus more on extreme weather, but I'm sure that there will be threads of communication and messaging in that discussion. And I think yeah.
I'm sorry. So what are the good points of messaging that we're executing, and what are the areas for improvement?
Well, I think the good points are the fact that we just now have people like the outstanding Dr. Laura Myers and Kim Klokow and folks in the tent. And so they can help us to understand that just plastering a polygon or a map on a website or on Twitter or television might not necessarily resonate, for example, when, as studies have shown, half the people may not be able to even recognize or locate their county on the map. And so I think one of the things that I consistently heard is this notion of understanding your audience. Ed Maybach has even talked about this. If you don't understand your audience, it's like throwing darts at a dartboard with the lights off. And I think meteorologists, whether it's in the broadcast field or even in the weather service, are starting to understand that. I mean, I still can't believe when I look at all the watches and warnings, and Rick, Weather Service, I've seen, some of this is starting to be narrowed down, but I taught a class last year at University of Georgia, and we were looking at all the watches and warnings. I was looking at flood watches, all the various types of flood watches and warnings. And Rick, I don't know exactly how many there are, but my God, it was it was crazy. And so if my mom is looking at that, she's like, well, what's the difference? I mean, what's the difference? So I think there's sort of the facets program and the hazard simplification program, these types of things that are going on in the community. You heard a lot of discussion about where we are on some of those types of things. I think that's a good thing. I think we need to have this discussion, but I'm going to say this, I'm going to lob this right into the atmosphere. I'm hearing still a lot of, positive vibes towards having the social sciences community. We're seeing it in Vortex Southeast, more of it, but we got to put our money where our mouth is with it. Otherwise, it's cute. In other words, it's cute that we're doing it. We're talking about it. This is the next frontier of meteorology. But I think, and this may be controversial, I think it has to be supported at the same level we support things like radars and satellites now. Because, I mean, gosh, look at GOES East. It's great. Have you seen the time and space resolution that we're getting from this? Have you seen what the dual polarization radar? So, man, we're making advances with the technology and with our resources. Can you imagine if we put the same kind of resources behind some of the things we know we need to do to get the messaging over the finish line?
So specifically, other than cutting down the number of warnings or simplifying that, if we gave you, okay, Marshall's in charge of one thing communication wise for the next year, and you're going to fix it between now and the next meeting, what would that be?
Well, I'm going to actually, that's actually a question I was talking to Kim Klokow about on Weather Geeks a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things she said that resonated with me, and it kind of gets at what I was just saying a little bit. She says we need ground truthing on how we're communicating and how the messaging is being received. In other words, in a high impact event, like a tornado that comes through James's Market or like a Hurricane Harvey, we're trying new things now. But how do we know they're being effective if we're not ground truthing those events sort of post real time? The same way that we go out and do an assessment of a tornado or go out and do an assessment of damage from a storm surge. How do we know that particular color being used in the polygon, or how do we know that particular set of words resonated with everyone in terms of the storm surge model? I thought that was a great idea. I would like to see that happen, and hopefully we will see it happen. So
I think that too. What does it look like?
Yeah, I think we've seen a little of it, Kevin. I'm a social media user as all of you are, but I don't use Snapchat. Any of you guys on Snapchat? But they have this.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they've got this Snap Map or Geo Map or some kind of mapping feature. And from some of the recent events that we've had, I hear that it actually was pretty effective in real time in places like Puerto Rico during Maria. But I don't know that for a fact. I know there are a couple of research studies that are looking at the efficacy of things like Snapchat and Twitter feeds in terms of post assessment, but that's just ad hoc. I mean, I think Kim's right. I think we need some type of ground validation. Otherwise, we're just putting all of these ideas out. I mean, think about this. If the National Weather Service, the Weather Prediction Center, or EMC, they're not going to put out a new version of the WRF model or GFS, or European Center's not going to put out a version of the Euro model without evaluating its efficacy. We're putting out all of these ideas for better communication. We're putting out all of these ideas for using the right colors and the right language and downsizing our warning. And for example, just recently, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, some parts of the United States, we got rid of some of the warnings, like the blizzard warning, lake effect. Some warnings were downsized. Yeah. In the net, that's probably a good idea in some cases, but we probably need to evaluate that. We probably need to do, and I'm sure hopefully the Weather Service will probably need to do a little post-assessment to see, was that a good idea, or was it something in a boardroom somewhere that sounded like a good idea, but actually is not as effective as what we had. So that's actually where I would like to see things. I mean, that's not my original idea. That's Kim Klokow and who McLean now, I should add her married name in there, someone that I respect highly who knows way more about that aspect of this field than I do.
Yeah, and I would agree with that exactly. I mean, Kim and I have talked about that, and others. We spend a huge amount of time. And Kevin, you asked the question, what does it look like? I don't know exactly what it looks like, but we spend a huge amount of time doing post-storm surveys, out driving around dirt roads and marking where tree limbs are broken and things like that. And that's important to do that, obviously, to develop the tornado history and climatology. But we need to be spending at least as much energy or more out talking to people. I mean, ideally, you would know in real time what people were doing and thinking and hearing, and how many different sources of information they were using to make their decisions. But we need to do a lot more. We just don't really know. We don't know if anything we're doing is working. We don't know if the impact-based warnings is a good thing or a bad thing. We don't know if the colors, if the reduction of the number of watches and warnings is a good thing or a bad thing. We think it is, based on some surveying and other work that Gina Esco and others have done, but we don't know. And there's just, it's really hard to move forward in a really big way, I think, until we kind of get a better handle on where we are right now. But this is one of the hardest things to get a handle on. It's hard to measure.
Well, we have this thing imping out there. If you don't have that, if you're listening in right now, check out that app. You can download that to your app, and wherever you are, you can imping if it's raining or drizzling or ice pellets where you are. I'm just throwing this out there because it just popped into my mind while Rick was talking. It would be nice to have an app, perhaps in every weather forecast office jurisdiction, or James or Kevin or Aubrey or in your market, letting people, they can imping you if they got your messaging, if they received your messaging about that tornado warning. I mean, how do we know people are even getting these messages? How do they know? We know that they understood that we were in a PDS situation. If you had a little app where you could say, "Hey, I got that. I understand. That's data that somebody can use for assessment."
Say it, Kevin. Say it.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think in application, it's probably difficult because are we going to get people to put another app on their phone and let it sit there in the hopes that, 6 months from now or 3 months from now, we get into severe weather season, that they would use it or even remember that it's there. But it is a fantastic idea conceptually. And I think both Kim and Marshall's point is great in that I think that's probably what launched Kim to where she is the stuff that she did going out after the fact and talking to people after the 2011 deal, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of what sent her off in that direction. And the information that she got there continues to inform my presentation even to this day. So I guess somebody just needs to go out and start and, knock on doors.
But Kevin, so for example, here at the University of Georgia, where shout out to all the Bulldogs out there. I know it's a lot of Alabama listeners. We represented well in the championship game. So I want to make sure it was a little heartbreaking. I was actually in Austin, Texas, watching the game with a couple of Alabama people at a sports bar across the street. So we're over it a little bit, but I am on the athletic board at UGA. So I want to give a shout out to any Bulldog fans out there, and congrats to the Alabama folks out there. And Rick Smith knows how I feel because we spanked the Oklahoma Sooners there the week before, at least.
Okay,
so.
We're running out of
I'm just kidding.
Oh, brother. This is going down the tubes.
Yeah, show title is Football Brains.
That's right. No, but where I was going with that is here at the University of Georgia, we got a grant, not me, but a couple of colleagues, to study the post-assessment activities on the decisions that people made with Hurricane Matthew a couple of years ago. And some of the information that's coming out of that by my colleagues at Georgia is fascinating. That's a one-off ad hoc NSF grant that they got funded in a rapid response mode to go do that. Where is the sort of systematic process to do that, and who is responsible for it? Who should be doing it? I don't know. That's a rhetorical question, perhaps, but it's the Weather Service certainly is putting their money behind to some degree some of these social sciences activities.
Yeah.
But for example, are TV stations gonna? I think you guys are ultimately the closest to the public in the Weather Service.
The difficulty there is that if a television station funds it, which most won't now,
right,
they will want that information to stay proprietary.
They'll want to keep it proprietary. Trust me, I understand that. Yeah.
Could we voluntold you and Kim to just go and start then? Since
you
said you had money, and Kim is there, in the area. So it sounds like you raised your hand.
I just don't know. I just don't know where things are within the federal structure, and that's why I looked at Rick a little bit. I used to be on NOAA's advisory board, but I'm kind of out of the loop on that. I'm on NASA's advisory board, but I don't know currently where the infrastructure is within the federal system to do it. And frankly, I don't know, given the sort of tightness of the budgets and those types of things these days. Yeah. I don't know where the home should be. It should be a nonprofit, an NGO, or
we need to ask Kim about that, because she's obviously going to be the closest to that. But as I'm sitting here chewing on what you said, what I think, and this is something I've watched, I feel like I've watched for some time now. And let me preface it by saying, and I've said it before, look, I studied under James Spann, okay? I was his first intern. I get severe weather. I get all the things. I get it. But one of the things that has put me in a little bit of fear for my section of the enterprise and my business is that we seem to be defaulting back to only severe weather coverage. In addition to that, we're the only ones that can give you severe weather coverage, and we're the only ones that are giving you, the education and the context. And those things are fine, but on the severe weather side, that's a maximum of maybe 25 to 30 days per year. And we can't run a business off of that.
Right.
And so if we're going to go out and start asking people, which we should be doing, and I think maybe at some level, some television consultants somewhere must be doing this, or maybe they're not. But I would argue for a more, if this is the right term, holistic approach, and let's go out and find out where they're getting their information every day, not just on severe weather days, because that's going to inform a lot of things. There are, and we asked, who was it? The Dave Clark? Was it Dave Clark?
Dave Clark? Yeah. Well, he's no longer there, but at the time.
Right. I mean, I asked him because I thought there was some path to an answer, but I would love to know how many people are getting their weather information from the native app on the iPhone. And now he implied that thing, gets a bazillion, hits a day, but we need to know all of that.
Yeah,
and there are a bunch of apps out there. Yeah. But it's not substantive. Now, clearly for some people it's enough, but if we're gonna plant our flag on severe weather coverage and context and education, then we need to go find out where they are now, because we missed the opportunity to get them at the dawn of this. And then now we need to go find out where they are and figure out how we can get in there. And that's not James, an endorsement of doing it on social media. That's an endorsement of figuring out where they are and then where it benefits them, and then secondarily us to be.
Well, have you guys talked in the past on WeatherBrains about the 538 study that was done 2 years ago?
Refresh.
Yeah, well, the 538, Nate Silver and his folks did it's an article you can Google out there that talks about where people are getting their weather information broadly. And I think it was a number close to 60% are getting it from a digital source, meaning either a website, an app, or a specific station's website. But to get it back to your point, Kevin, I am actually, where I focus most of my messaging now is actually those broader other days, the flood days, the heat days, the cold days. I think, if you go back and look at those National Weather Service data sets of what kills people every year in America weather-wise, it's not tornadoes, it's not hurricanes. I mean, those losses of lives are precious and valuable, but the biggest weather killer is extreme temperature and floods. And yet people think that's where I feel there's more danger. I often say, I often say that you will have a situation where you will have a parent that will run their kid off the football field in August because a storm pops up and it's lightning, and then as soon as the lightning storm's over, they'll rush them back out there in full pads with 108-degree heat index. Now that actually may have the heat index situation may be the more dangerous of the two situations, but people's perception of that, and so that's why I actually focus my messaging more so on some of those other events and how we collect information on those. So I actually agree with you that the severe weather still kind of captures our attention, and rightfully so in some degree. But God, we miss out on so much data from other events.
Well, and I agree with your point, and I think you're taking it down a level from severe weather, but I would take it down even farther. And I just went to my blog because you mentioned the survey, and I think it was Dennis Mercereau. He did one. Where was he? It was the Vein or something like that.
At the time, Gawker, the Vein.
Still there. Yeah. I think it was in there, and I went to my blog to look for it because I wrote about it. I can't find it, but what popped up, which I thought was instructive, is something I wrote a couple of years ago. And the experience was I was new in this town, and I was standing in line at the grocery store, and a woman standing there with her college-age daughter recognized me and welcomed me to town, and yada, yada, yada. But the interesting part to me was, first of all, the funny part was the daughter, because the woman started talking to me, and the daughter had no idea who I was and didn't care. And as we talked, you could kind of sense that. Why is my mom talking to this strange man? And eventually the mother understood that too, and she kind of got agitated. The daughter, this is the weatherman on Channel 3, and we continued to talk. And I think as the daughter felt, she's probably 18 or 19, and she felt a little bit more comfortable in the situation, just out of nowhere, she says, well, I look at the weather a lot. And I went, oh, okay, well, here's an opportunity to do some market research. What are you talking about? On your phone, you mean? Yes. And do you just look at the app that came on the phone, or have you downloaded some other ones? No, just the app on the phone. But she was very adamant about she is at some level a weather user, and it's on a quiet day, right? And so where I would like for us to go is to find those points, because those are the habits, right? If you get them, it's the old adage about morning shows on radio, as goes the morning, so goes the day. They're going to roll over. They're going to look at their phone. They're going to check Facebook and whatever they check. And on their little circuit, you want to catch them there and then create the habit through the rest of the time period. Right. But you want to do it even on a day when there's nothing, because we don't know what she's looking for. This girl looks at her phone several times a day, and it might just be for the temperature. And if we have any hope of coexisting with the automation, which quite frankly, we can sit and complain about, right? But it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's okay for most people. They don't care if it's going to be 72 or 73. We do, but it's close enough. And so we got to go find out where those habits are. And again, we missed the opportunity early on to help create those habits. So it's going to be a tougher slog to get there. But I would go down even, I think, a level from your comment, beyond severe weather, beyond, what's the term? Aubrey's gone. Inconvenient weather. That's some consultant thing. Because now they're trying to play on this. Well, you got to go figure out how it's going to be inconvenient to somebody and play that up. And that's going to bring them to the television. But even a level below that, they're just, we need to go find those foundational points and work on those, because if we do that and then we add value there, all the other stuff will flow from that.
Yeah,
don't we know that people are getting weather on their phones? It's not that hard.
But we're not stepping up and serving them properly. I ranted on this program. It's fairly recent on my blog. I was wholly certain I was going to get called on the carpet, because we put out our latest app from Nexstar, and literally the day after, maybe the second day after, I was off doing something, and some woman came up and was just furious with me because the one that we had was not great, and the one that we put out is wholly useless. You open that app and there is literally no usable information on the screen that is staring you in the face when you open the phone, they open the app, that you can use. You have to take some other action to it. And it is horrible. It's a horrible design. It's a horrible. But none of the other ones are doing any better. At least from our point of view. They're giving stuff. People are using them, right? Somebody goes to the weather app on Apple a bazillion times a day.
How many people? Oh, sorry. How many of you guys have used that app? I don't actually use it, but I have a lot of just people in my circle of friends that are smart, attentive people, but not from our field, that talk about, what is this Dark Skies app?
Yeah.
And because it gives them these hyper local forecasts and
predictive radar.
Yeah, it's basically, it's also, so there's another company that we had on Weather Geeks called Climacell that's trying to do some of this very hyper local street level thing based on, they wouldn't actually reveal a lot of their technology actually, but I think they're using cell phone signals and they're doing all kinds of interesting things. But oddly, I actually don't have Dark Skies on my phone. I guess because I'm aware of sort of the limitations of where we can go with some of this hyper local stuff in the models right now. I'm just a little, again, I don't want to say skeptical of it, but I don't consume it the way I had a friend who's a jogger tells me, she says, oh yeah, I pull out Dark Skies all the time because it'll tell me exactly where it's raining along my jogging route.
Yep.
And I said, well, it's pulling up radar and sort of extrapolating it. So,
but hello, Nate. Knock a little louder, Nate. We hear you at the door. Come in.
Hello.
Hi. Hello from Chicago. It's cold here.
But we suffer on that, I think, is what you're saying. We suffer from knowing too much. And just like the difference between 72 and 73, it's fine for them. And it may sometimes be wrong when it says it's not going to rain on your jogging route and then they get wet, but we're not right all the time either.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I know there's these marketing gimmicks in the TV industry, like these 2 degree guarantees or whatever, all this kind of stuff. But I use my wife as my litmus test, and we don't really want to know all of that. We don't care. I mean, I just need to know whether I need to wear a sweater or a coat or a light jacket that day. And so to your point, Kevin, that doesn't matter. I mean, 73 or 72, you're probably going to make the same choice. So I think that's right. I think we do get, and I often talk about this on Twitter and various places. I said I have this thing that I've been saying now in some of the talks I've been giving, saying avoid the inertia of practice. And what I mean by the inertia of practice is avoid the inertia of things that just are part of your daily practice in your career or your profession that are absolutely meaningless to your stakeholder or your customer. I mean, so, like I said, I throw out PDS. We get all excited, or, oh my God, PDS, they're using the term PDS. But I mean, my wife just wants to know, is it going to produce a tornado or not? I mean, and so I think those kinds of things are things that I think we're kind of getting at some of those same types of things.
So where does your wife go if she wants to know if it's going to produce a tornado?
Me.
Yeah. But she's not a representative example.
No, but to get at your point though, I get this question a lot. People are, well, what do you use? What are your apps that you use? Well, I mean, I'll tell them the apps that I use, but I also tell them, well, I also have radar scope, and I'm pulling up, I'm looking at things in real time, and I'm going to the models and pulling up, the HRR model. Those are things you're not, staff person in my office at UGA, they're not going to go and do all those things. I can, but they want to know where they can go for that information. And what I always tell them is, look, just make sure you have an app that is alerting you, because we have to talk about the weather radios, but I always just tell them to make sure, in addition to some standard weather app, you've got a proactive app of some type, whether it's Red Cross, tornado, or here in Georgia we have the Ready Georgia app, or FEMA has. Make sure that you have something that is pushing you information so that you can understand that, and a lot of people actually that I find appreciate that information. I guess a lot more local television station apps, and I don't know if any of yours, a lot of the local television station apps will do that functionality now. So that's what a lot of people tell me they're using. So, Kevin, to your point earlier, I would be curious does anyone have any data on the use of local weather television apps versus the weather.com or the AccuWeather or the Weather Underground app? I've not seen that yet, because I think you were hinting at that earlier. I think we know people are using apps, and I think they're using the internet, but it's sort of a granular level down from that. Which apps are they using? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I study people. I hang out in Dollar General. See, all you guys don't do this. I
go to Dollar General, James. I love it. They've got some really good fudge crackers.
They really do. So a man after my own heart. But I study people, and I honestly believe, and again, I don't have the quantitative data to prove this, but I honestly believe a majority of people, they don't download any weather apps. They use the stock app that comes on their phone. Now, some do, obviously, but I think, in my opinion, the majority are using these stock apps. And I think, Marshall, that data is from the Weather Channel, on at least the Apple phones.
It is, but I think most of that is on sort of the IBM side of the house now, or a lot of that data side of it is, at least in the Weather Company, which is, the Weather Company is now a separate entity from the Weather Channel. And so, because I don't get a sort of get a paycheck, but I don't get a paycheck from the Weather Channel. I'm a consultant to the Weather Channel, so I don't know all the ins and outs of all of that. I think they have the market share. What was that?
We need you to get us those numbers, Marshall.
Well, like I said,
how many people hit here's thing every day?
Here's an interesting tidbit. You mentioned Weather Geeks. By the way, we're heading to our 4th year in July. Here's a tidbit. I still, when I walk into the Weather Channel, just like when James Spann comes to be a guest on the Weather Channel and has to get a guest visitor's badge, or Rick Smith, I do as well. And I actually like it that way, because, as you guys know, we try to make the show, and we make my perspective on the show as independent as possible. So I am not an employee of the Weather Channel, so I don't necessarily have to toe a party line of any kind or company line, and that's important to me, and frankly I think it's important to the producers too.
But let me chase a quick rabbit here. Marshall, do you have any inkling or knowledge that the Weather Channel might in the near future begin to issue their own severe weather watches and warnings?
I don't have any information on that at all. But I will say the people that I work with and interact with the Weather Channel, I didn't sound like something that they would be thrilled. But I can't speak for. I mean, I just deal with a small subset of the colleagues at the Weather Channel, but absolutely no knowledge of that.
Okay, because that's one of my concerns. We're all, and obviously we have social science problems, but none of us have training in social science. So we're using Kim and Laura and all these wonderful people to help us.
Speak for yourself.
Well, Nate has great training in socials. He is our social scientist on the show right now. But AccuWeather, correct me if I'm wrong, they issue their own warnings, right?
Well,
is that
I got to be careful here. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that they have a subsidiary of AccuWeather, AccuWeather Enterprise Solutions, and again, I'm just going by what I see in the public space, and I think they have clients in the railroad and other industries, and I've heard of these types of things,
they do issue warnings, but the difference is their warnings are issued to clients,
right,
who have paid for that service.
That is correct.
Paid for a particular level of warning and a particular level of service. And I think if I go off the reservation a little bit, I think where that's caused heartburn is when some of those warnings are then relayed to the public who may not be on board with what exactly the warning is. And you look at the Kansas Turnpike thing, you look at, I think there's a number of universities that use them. And I think that's where some of the heartburn is coming, whether that falls at AccuWeather's feet or at the particular clients for relaying those warnings without the kind of explanation. But you can pay AccuWeather to do specific warnings, and they tailor those warnings based on the criteria that are important to you. If you're, running a freight train that's 3 miles long, it's going to take 10 miles to stop, then you need a certain level of warning. On the other hand, if you've got a car plant that takes so many minutes to shut down, then, a hospital, that sort of thing, they tailor those warnings to those particular clients. They are not necessarily public warnings like we would talk about that the Weather Service would issue.
Yeah, I think that's right. We actually had a case here in Georgia, in Atlanta, a couple of years ago, where university, I believe it was Emory University here in Atlanta, they had a service, and I don't know who it was, so I can't say, but they issued a tornado warning warning for the campus, and they started evacuating people from buildings and classes and things like that, I think. And I think it was counter to what was coming out of National Weather Service Peachtree City. And so there was quite a bit of discussion and post dialogue about that particular event as well, because I think they used some private vendor as well.
So let me ask Nate here. Now, Nate, you are the tallest hog in the trough. NBC O&Os.
No.
NBC O&Os, the weather. Is there any plan for your stations to begin issuing their own severe weather warnings?
To my knowledge, no.
Well, you're the main guy. I mean, you're it. You're the big guy.
I'm the new guy, and I'm still learning my way around. But to my knowledge, there's no plan. There's no work behind that to issue our own watches and warnings. The Weather Service does a fine job of that, and I think our role is to take the warnings that are issued, localize those, provide context. We can, in wall-to-wall coverage, if you've got a radar that's spinning at 1 or 2 or 3 RPM, revolutions per minute, you may be getting updates every 10, 15, 20 seconds on a storm, and I can go into a certain amount of detail. That allows me to go into a certain amount of detail within reason that the Weather Service may not be able to provide if they're issuing updates every 5 or 10 minutes. And then I can, again, there's that tone of voice piece that goes with that is hard to translate over a national weather radio. But at this point, no, the Weather Service does a fine job of issuing warnings. I think that the challenge for us is how do we take those warnings and make them as relevant to our particular viewer base and app user and everything as we can.
And Kevin, WFAA in Dallas, now that this Met Loop doesn't exist, are they issuing their own warnings anymore?
I don't know.
Okay, because in Marshall, I don't know if you're in on this. There was a company called Met Loop. And WFAA in Dallas, they were taking proprietary warnings, independent from the Weather Service, and using them on the air. In the Met Loop, we had a show. If you're listening to this, search Met Loop WeatherBrains, and one of those guys had nerve to come on here, and he'll probably never come back on again. But they're
one of
out
the
of
most
business.
Uncomfortable WeatherBrains conversations.
I heard about it. Yeah, I heard about that.
It was brutal. I mean, it was brutal, but we were just maybe too cranky. But they claimed a POD of what, Brian? 95 and
something
an
like that.
FAR of 5.
Yeah.
Did they show the data though, or did they just
No.
All they were really doing was taking the existing warnings and trimming them down.
Exactly.
And that, I mean, arguably you can say, okay, yeah, the Weather Service and Rick's guys or whatever make a warning. Can you shave, 5% off of that or whatever, and claim that you are, because the claim was they're annoying fewer people by that or whatever, and then pitching that as an accuracy thing.
Well, can I go somewhere with this? Given where James just took this conversation, look, I mean, I'm interested in what you all think about, because I clearly see a movement within the weather enterprise and particularly the federal sector towards more of that type of thing, because there's this real effort to provide more private sector input into the federal forecasting enterprise. And so, I mean, you've got the new weather bill that was just passed earlier this year and was really worked on for the last several years. I mean, you've got almost mandates in those bills now that say private companies have to be a part of the operational satellite network. You've got private companies now like IBM and Panasonic and others running models and frankly putting them out there for people to see now. So, I mean, for all of those claims about, what was it, weather loop or media loop or whatever it was, I mean, I think we're in this era now. And so, I mean, do we embrace it? Do we corral it? I mean, I think at least in the short term, and I mean, some of that is, I'll candidly say it, some of it's politically driven. There is an effort to try to, bring more federal private influence into the forecasting process. And there are some, and I'm of this camp, people can disagree or agree with if they want to. I'm of this camp that believes that weather information, I think what you as broadcasters do and what some companies do in value adding the data is fine, and we need that. But I am of the view that weather information is a public good in the same way that firefighting services and police protection is for communities. And so I think there needs to be some level of very strong federal influence on it. That's just my view. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have, just like you have a fire department that's funded by your city tax base, that there are still value-added services associated with the fire industry. So I'm just making the point that we're in this era, and it's actually being pushed on a lot of different fronts. So how do we deal with that type of situation?
Well, the horse is out of the barn. You can't regulate it because there's no regulating body that has authority. You're not going to embrace it because that's legitimizing it. The only thing you can do, I think, because it's now turned into something of a competitive marketplace, right? It's a product, and so the thing that you have to do is offer a better service. Will everybody come? No, but you have to offer a better service. And in the broadcast sector, we're not doing that. We went to social media and we neglected mobile and are not we're putting out products that are largely automated. And so there really is no differentiation point between, the native app that comes on the phone. Yeah, there are more, I get it. But at the heart, there's not anything to draw people back to those. Although some of the things are coming, geofencing and stuff like that, okay, yeah, that's good. But that goes back to the 25 days a year argument, right? And you're not going to create a habit that way, and you're not going to run a business that way.
Yeah.
So let's go down this next rat hole, Marshall. Barry Myers. Go. Go. Just go.
No. I was only laughing because I was hoping you wouldn't ask me. I'm normally not. Here's my take. I know Barry. I get along fine with Barry. I just talked to him at AMS in Austin. I wrote I'm on the record, so I'm not saying anything that you can't go and Google in a Forbes article that I wrote. I wrote a Forbes article about, I don't know, 6 months ago, saying the 5 things that I think the next NOAA administrator needs to do and needs to be about. And I said very clearly in there, and frankly, some people kind of got ticked off at me. I said, I think Barry probably can do the job. I said, but I think here are the things that if a Barry Myers or Scott Rader or all the other names that were being bantered around at the time, here's what they need to be about. And, you know, they needed to fight strongly for funding for the satellite programs. They needed to put back in budget for research in OAR, the Office of Research at NOAA, which the budget that had come out in early January had stripped. They needed to protect some of the aspects of research related to our long-term weather processes. And you know where I'm going with that, since I don't want to get the bell. But the point is, you know, look, Barry's probably, you know, unless I'm missing some tea leaves somewhere, probably going to be confirmed. I think there's enough sort of experience there that I don't think he's sort of this sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of, I think some of the concerns about him have been overplayed. I do. You know, I think that there are some things that certainly people are aware of, but I think there's enough of a sort of people paying attention to this. And the other thing that I think people don't need to be too concerned about is we're already a year into this administration. Barry's still not confirmed. By the time he does get confirmed, we might be 2 years or 2.5 years in. The government doesn't move that fast to make large sweeping changes, even if you're worried about that. So I don't think that this is, I think a lot of this has been overplayed. You know, I told Barry to his face there at AMS, if you need anything from me, I'm there, because, you know, I'm very supportive of our nation and our country and our weather enterprise. I'll work with anybody. So that's my take on Barry Myers.
But doesn't he have, is it concerning, doesn't he have a known history of however many years that company has been around of being one who is trying to hobble the Weather Service?
Yeah, I mean, I generally have tried to avoid that conversation for various reasons, but I think the records are out there for people that can kind of look at some of those discourse. I think those questions are being asked in Congress and various places. So, you know,
I'm not asking you to decide it. I guess I'm asking, am I right? Am I right in my assessment? Isn't that true? I mean, I don't want you to take a side.
Yeah.
But isn't it accurate to say that his company has spent 40, 50, whatever years really making strong efforts to hobble the Weather Service?
Yeah, I just would prefer not to comment on that because of just some of the things that I'm in the process of interacting with these folks. But again, the data is out there for people to look at for themselves and draw those conclusions.
I think one interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, he has no science background. Is that correct? Isn't he a lawyer?
Well, I think that's one of the things that have been some of his critics. But that's frankly the case for the person that has been put forth for NASA and several other.
Yeah, he's being put there to be an administrator.
Yeah, right. But, you know, I will say this. The AMS, the organization I was president of, bestowed AMS Fellow on Barry Myers, James, and others. You know what that means. And so, you know, yes, I would like to see strong science leadership in this administration, but, you know, in the case of Barry, I think he knows enough about the weather and climate enterprise that that's not as much of an issue. But I will say this, NOAA is not just weather and climate. NOAA is fisheries and oceans and all kinds of other things. But I will say this also, the number 2 in charge at NOAA is amazing. Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who is confirmed and in place. And he's amazing. I've talked to him. I've had him on Weather Geeks. What I do know is that he is a scientist. He's a PhD and former oceanographer of the Navy. So there's plenty of science representation there at the highest levels in NOAA. And, you know, like it or love it, you can't run a large weather company without knowing a little bit about the science as well. So I don't have those particular concerns. I'm not going to come on this show, or I'm not going to go on any other show and talk negatively about Barry Myers. But what I will say is that I think the next NOAA administration has to be accountable for a certain amount, 5 key things that I laid out in that Forbes article. And that's kind of my take.
Rick, your audio is breaking up. I didn't hear your opinion on this situation.
Hey, I'm not that stupid.
So Brian, they're going to cut your check. What say you? You're a retired WCM. What do you think about Mr. Myers taking over NOAA?
I have mixed opinions. I don't think you necessarily have to be a meteorologist, or as Dr. Shepard just said, there's a lot of things in NOAA that are not meteorology. I do think it's kind of funny that the American Meteorological Society does bestow fellowship on a person who does not have much of a background in weather.
Let me just jump in and just calibrate that statement a little bit, because there's no criteria that says you have to have a background in weather to be a fellow. The only criteria for fellow is significant contributions to the community and the enterprise. And so I think he and various others meet that. There are a lot of fellows that actually don't have degrees in meteorology. So. And by the way, just a quick plug, there are some key people. Please put in those nominations for people that you think deserve to be an AMS fellow. The deadlines are due May 1st. All it takes is someone to pull together a package and get 3 people to write a supporting letter. I served on that committee in the past. So I know exactly what it takes. And so I want to get a plug in for that.
And that's a big deal too. I was working with Greg Fishel when he was made a fellow, and I don't think I'm talking too out of turn, but that moved him in a way that I hadn't seen him moved in the past. It's really a big honor. It's a big honor. And there's some other big honors. I know I was sitting in the audience when James got Broadcaster of the Year for me. I mean, look, whatever you feel about the AMS or these big societies or whatever, these awards are awards that are from your peers. And so people that put forth the effort to nominate you for these things, James, that you were nominated from that, and 3 people supported you in that nomination. I don't have any idea if you know who was involved in your nomination package, but the point is, your peers acknowledge you, and that says a lot. I mean, to me, those mean more than some of these other things that have come along in my career. When I got the the Helmut Landsberg Award just this year in Austin, and that's a career award for outstanding achievement in urban meteorology or climate, and for some of my research that I've done over the years, and that meant more to me than writing a Forbes article or hosting a TV show or some other things. That was people forget, because I do Twitter and outreach and TV shows and all that kind of stuff. People forget at the core, I'm a scientist and a researcher. And so to be acknowledged for my scientific research with that award was actually very fulfilling to me.
All right. So I want to head down another path here, and there's no buzzer here. I want to talk about climate. Marshall, I believe and this is just my opinion, and this is a very politicized subject. We all know that it invokes anger, and that's the reason we don't talk about it much here. But I think, in my opinion, you and Carrie Emanuel represent 2 of the best communicators on the subject. You do it right. People to your zombie talk. I heard you share that talk at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. You 2 get it right. You present facts. What can we do about this subject and not worry about hate or anger? What can we do? Because I'm getting a lot of feedback there. I think
good. I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, okay. There's a breakup.
Yeah, you were kind of T-Pain there for a second there, James. There's a lot of auto-tune thing going on. But
that's a show title.
But
how many episodes are we in? And this is the first time we've had a T-Pain reference. Love it.
Shout out to T-Pain from Tallahassee, Florida. If you don't know, that's what it stands for. Tallahassee.
James is just on a boat. That's all.
Yeah, but if you listen to Luke Bryan if you want, I'm a music connoisseur, so I can go all over the place with music. If you listen to Luke Bryan's "That's My Kind of Night," he actually mentions T-Pain and Conway Twitty in that song. So, wow. But to kind of get at your question, James, here's the deal with me. At the end of the day, I can talk about this topic. And even if you disagree with me about the topic and I like you as a person, I'll still go have a beer with you. I mean, I don't take these things. The thing that I see is that people internalize this. And, one of the things that I think that frankly helps me, I'm trained as a scientist. And the reason I say that is important is that we are actually trained to engage in discourse. we put out a paper in the peer-reviewed literature, and once we publish it, we know it might be criticized. We know at a conference someone's going to challenge that. And so I am trained to have discourse and narratives on topics without it taking it personally. I think some people are so anchored in their ideology, their belief system or whatever, that they can't have an argument about something without it getting into a personal space or other types of things. And so I think what I try to do is present the facts based on the playing field that I operate in. The playing field that I operate in is the peer-reviewed literature, it's science conferences, and it's discourse. Is there uncertainty about climate? Absolutely there is. Is there enough that we know about it to make decisions? I think so. People will say all the time, well, there's uncertainty about some of this. And I said, well, there's uncertainty about an 80% forecast for rain, but most people will probably grab an umbrella. There's still usable information there too. So I think what we have to do is, let the politicians and all those people with I will say this, and I'm going to say it, and I've been known to say it from time to time. Part of the negative discourse about all of that stems back to something that Upton Sinclair said, which is that it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And if you think about the context of what Upton Sinclair is saying, you'll understand why there are people on many different sides that have kind of clouded, pun intended, the discussion. But if you stick with the discussion on the playing field that you're given as scientists, and you communicate a message that is resonating with kitchen table America. Look, I grew up in a small town in Georgia, just north of Atlanta. I can talk all the highfalutin science talk. I've got that training. But, if someone thinks something's about a dang polar bear or a monarch butterfly down in Mexico, that doesn't resonate with them when they're trying to figure out how to buy their groceries for the next week. So you've got to, I think I put a lot of onus on scientists to try to make sure that we're communicating the science in a non-hostile way and finding value systems that matter to your audiences. If I come to Tuscaloosa, or if I come to, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I talk to the Rotary Club, or if I talk to a faith-based community, I'm going to talk to them about values that resonate with them on that topic, not beat them over the head with a bunch of trend lines and graphs and science jargon. So that's just my approach.
And it goes back to knowing your audience, which I think is important. Go ahead, Nate.
Well, and I just wanted to riff off that a little bit and say that, part of that, I think, is admitting, and this is sort of comes back to Marshall, your point about, using the tools that the science has given us to do this. Part of that is acknowledging when the data don't line up with your predictions.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the predictions don't line up with how things work in reality. We need to acknowledge that. And here's the funny thing, from a communication standpoint, acknowledging the things that don't fit your model actually strengthens your persuasive ability as somebody talking about something, trying to convince somebody of something. So
that's a great point.
So if things don't line up the way you think they should, let's say, for example, there's a lot of work being done on rapid attribution, trying to determine how much of such and such an event was as a result of climate change and anthropogenic climate change. In some cases, and the AMS does a really good job. They put out a report every year, comes with the bulletin, and it talks about, here are the big events that we've run attribution studies on, and they run the gamut. Everything from we definitely feel and see there's a human fingerprint here, that climate change made this worse, or it made it more frequent or more likely to happen. And in some cases, they find nothing at all. Absolutely. And they report both equally, because that's where the science takes us. I think it's that honest approach to, if you want to go in and read climate change or read, voodoo or whatever into anything, you can. The science that we have allows us to take a step back and do it dispassionately, and to not wish cast, to not, I want it to snow 2 feet tomorrow night. But the reality is it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and Nate, can I pick off that a second? Couple of 2 points on that. Your wish casting. I wish that I'm wrong about what I know about climate, because if what I think is going on is right, my kids are going to be the losers in all of this. I got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, so I pray to God it's a hoax. I'm praying for a hoax. I hope it's all a hoax. I don't think it is, but I don't have a vested interest in being right about this. The second thing that I want to kind of convey, it's not an either or. I can't tell you how many times I get people that come up to me and say, well, there's always been climate variant change. The climate changes naturally. There's always been hurricanes. And I was like, yes, it's not either or, it's and. I mean, there's always been trees that fell in the forest too, but that doesn't mean a chainsaw is a hoax. I mean, you can still cut one down with a chainsaw, right? Even if one falls naturally. So I get sort of this sort of bifurcated, very binary logic in terms of how this discussed has always baffled me. And then what has also always baffled me is we all as meteorologists, there are forecasts that are missed sometimes. And so do we now not come back and listen to Nate Johnson or James Mann or Kevin Seal or Aubrey because maybe one forecast was off a little bit? No, people come back to you. But yet, if there's one paper, one sort of notion of a climate sensitivity study is different, they'll say, well, you got to throw it all out with the bathwater. And we don't do that with weather. So I think we need a very sane, calm down dialogue about this, acknowledging the places, as you said, Nate, where there's still uncertainty, but acknowledging, as Bob Inglis, a conservative, talks about, which is that there is enough risk there that is probably irresponsible conservative principle to completely ignore it or discard it. I think if we take that type of approach, and we also have to remember what the folks at Yale Climate Communication have said as well, there is always going to be this 10% dismissive crowd that just have such strong ideological belief about it. And that, frankly, that may be on both sides, actually, that you can't have a intelligent conversation with that. So I just don't do it. I try. If someone's doubtful and skeptical, but open-minded, I can have that conversation all day.
Yeah, but I think, the one thing Alan Gerard, he tweeted this, and I think what he said is correct. I will say that it would probably help climate change education if we as professionals focused our message on climate level events, not on looking for and trumpeting a climate change signal on every extreme weather event. I think the climate attributions has gone now to where, well, by golly, I'm going to tweet this out. It's anthropogenic climate change. Attribution studies take a little while. Even the rapid studies take a little while. And just tweeting it out doesn't make any sense. And that's enabling these people that says, well, I got to wipe this, global warming off my truck. It's enabling them to claim this stuff.
Absolutely, James. If you read the article I wrote, there's an article I wrote in Forbes, Google it if you're listening, Death to the Most Abused Question in Climate, I think it's what I call it. And the first thing I start off with in that article is I talk about, well, we got this big hurricane or this big wildfire, and you got Joe Bubba over here tweeting, well, that's climate change. See, I told you so. And then you got Jane Bubba over here saying, that's not climate change. We've always had hurricanes. I mean, so you already have this sort of binary logic here. And so, you take these sort of extreme stakes on the position. And so then it hurts. I think you're right, James. It hurts credibility of both of those arguments.
Yeah, it really does. But listen, we got to stop real quick here. Y'all hang tight. We're going to hit Professor Peters, Tony Rice. We're going to come back with Aubrey's email report because Aubrey was on the beach last week. Just the thought of that makes me happy.
Literally on the beach, not
literally on the beach.
The thought of me on the beach, James, makes you happy.
Yeah,
that's a show title.
She's still so relaxed. She's not taking the bait. You can just tell the look on her face is like, I don't care what you're saying. I was on the beach.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
All they ask is if you want vacation size.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Do not dare go away as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
One of the departed members of the WeatherBrains gang, J.B. Elliott, had a number of favorite topics. One of those was a heat burst. Heat bursts are typically associated with thunderstorms, but there is another type of warm wind that is more common. A foehn wind occurs when a deep layer of prevailing wind is forced over a mountain range by orographic lifting. As the wind travels up the mountain, it expands and cools, causing moisture to precipitate out. The dry air then passes over the crest and begins to move downslope. As the air descends to lower levels on the leeward side of the mountain, the air temperature increases adiabatically as it comes under greater atmospheric pressure, creating strong, gusty, warm, and dry wind. Foehn winds can raise the temperature by as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit in just a matter of hours. The Foehn wind originated in the Alps in Central Europe, which enjoys a warmer climate because of them. Foehn winds are notorious among mountaineers in the Alps, especially those climbing the Eiger, for whom the winds add additional difficulty in ascending an already difficult peak. Foehn winds are known around the world, often with different names. Argentina knows them as Zonda winds. In the Rocky Mountains, Canada, and Alaska, they're called Chinook winds. San Franciscans call them Diablo winds, while in Southern California, they are known as the Santa Ana winds. In South Africa, it is the Berg wind, and there are even more. Winds of this type are called snow eaters for their ability to make snow melt rapidly. This ability is based not only on high temperature, but also the low relative humidity of the air mass. Foehn winds are also associated with the rapid spread of wildfires, making some regions which experience these winds particularly fire-prone. These winds are often associated with popular mythology, with illnesses ranging from migraines to psychosis. The Santa Ana winds are often called the murder winds. A study by the University of Munich found that suicide and accidents increased by 10% during Foehn winds in Central Europe. The causation of Foehn sickness, however, remains to be proven. Well, enough hot air for now. If you have a question about the weather, you can send them to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Wednesday morning, the sun, earth, and moon, in that order, will form a syzygy, or the lining up of celestial bodies. The moon's orbit will take it through the Earth's shadow for a total lunar eclipse. The partial eclipse begins at 6:48 a.m. Eastern, 5:48 Central, 4:48 Mountain, and 3:48 a.m. Pacific. Bad news for the Eastern time zone, though. You'll likely only see the first couple of unimpressive minutes of the partial eclipse before moonset. The farther west you go, the more of the eclipse you see. Central time zone will see a little bit more, maybe up till about the beginning of totality, especially if you're on the far west side of the time zone. Those of you in the Pacific time zone and westward, including Alaska and Hawaii, and any WeatherBrains listeners in Japan, you get to see the whole show. And what a hype show it's been. It's received a lot of hype in recent weeks as a blue blood supermoon. So let's unwind that. It is a blue moon. It's the second full moon of the calendar month. But this, of course, has no impact on what you actually see. It doesn't change the color any. Lunar eclipses do take on a reddish-orange color, and that's from the sunlight that's passing around Earth through our atmosphere, which scatters the blue elements out of that light, leaving behind red, just like a sunset. So the blood label, I guess, is earned. And it's near enough a lunar perigee, or the closest point in the moon's orbit, to earn it that super label. So, you may have also been hearing claims that this is the first blue blood supermoon in 150 years. It's not, and I wish I know who started this and why they had to put it on the wire services. It's being reported everywhere this way by some pretty reputable sources. However, the eclipse of March 30th, 1866, that claim's hanging its hat on, occurred nearly 2 weeks after perigee. Not a supermoon by any definition that I'm aware of. If we look back to the eclipse of December 30th, 1982, that did coincide with a perigee, close enough to be called a supermoon. It's also the second moon of the calendar month, at least in UTC time, which is the only time zone that really matters, at least to astronomers. Elsewhere in the sky, if you've spotted the ISS pass over your home in the past, there's another object for you to look for very soon. Last week, California-based startup launched an artificial satellite into low Earth orbit with the sole purpose of being spotted. They call it the Humanity Star. It's about 1 meter in diameter roughly and has 65 highly reflective panels. That shape is called a hexaconta pentagon. It's expected to be visible in the US in about 5 to 6 weeks, with the Pacific time zone seeing the first visible passes and the rest of the US getting their chance soon after. and it's expected to be visible worldwide throughout its 9-month orbit time before it naturally deorbits. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, let's just see if Aubrey happens to have a little email to read tonight.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Sorting through over 300 emails today, I managed to find a few. And I just want to say, Professor Peters, that was a rather remarkable Professor Peters. I learned a lot from that one with all the different names.
I thought that was good, and it renews my call for Professor Peters to release those to some format, in a podcast or
an audio
clusters of them. Yeah. Yes, so something. So hop on
Kevin,
that, Brian.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this is a podcast. Just thought I'd put that out there.
Is Kevin speaking?
Well, it's just still the renewed call, and I didn't mean
Who's
a
this guy
podcast.
over here on the right?
Yeah, I didn't mean it. Needs to be audiobook or something like that. Because how many are there now?
600.
600. Let's try a different tack. Marshall Shepard. if those were released, if all the Professor Peters 101 things were released, in groups of 10 or 20 or however they were done, would that be a reference material that you would find helpful for students?
Perhaps. Yeah. In some cases,
not.
I heard them mention heat bursts just there. I just talked about heat bursts the other day when I was teaching about mesoscale networks. So yeah,
I think it would be study material.
I could probably, play that little clip there in my class as I'm talking about something like a heat burst, for example.
It's like Jeff Habby's stuff, Habby Hints.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Exactly. Yes, exactly. So a text and audio version. So because then it becomes a reference guide too. And let's have that happen.
And he'll do that in his spare retirement time.
Yeah, do that by the next episode.
All right. Couple of emails. This one comes in from Brian Hansen. Recently listened to show 625 about the broadcaster and the AMS meeting. And I was actually also looking up the AMS site to see if any of those presentations are on there yet, and it doesn't look like it. And Brian also said, just keep checking the AMS site, and they will be posted within the next month. And also, Ada Monzon, is that how you pronounce her name? The presentation about the impact of Hurricane Maria on Puerto Rico is also on YouTube now. So if anyone needs a pick of the week, her link is actually in here. So that is on YouTube, which is awesome. And also a talk given by Richard Alley at the AMS Presidential Forum, a presentation on how to communicate science, how to put science in context for the reader or listener. Just a little elaboration on what we were talking about for tonight. So thanks for submitting that email with those links. That's awesome. And a sad note, and Daniel Lucas reminds us of this, that former storm chaser Joel Taylor passed away a couple of days ago. I believe maybe today was his memorial service, if I saw on Twitter correctly, or maybe it was yesterday. He was only 38. So our thoughts and prayers are with his family and his friends and anyone that definitely knew him. So always heard he was a great meteorologist. All right. So Chris White also sends us a link about Don't Say We Didn't Tell You, about Facebook and TV viewership and pushing TV viewers to Facebook and money, should they charge, and all this stuff. And not only is the article good, but there's also actually the first time I think I've seen an article with maybe legitimate comments and not just, as James, or who's, what's that word I'm thinking? Oh, I think Bill O'Reilly uses bloviating as far as the comments are concerned. So actually legitimate comments on a web article. So that's actually a really good article. Doug Fuller responds and sends us a listener survey response from Odenville, Alabama. I watch the Weather Extreme video and read the blog quite frequently. The show is advertised there. So thanks for that. And that is so far. I think there's a couple more. I just haven't gone through everything yet. So if you have an email that you'd like to send us, email at weatherbrains.com. If you have a guest suggestion, we'd love to get that contact information from you as well. It's a big help to our booking officer, Bill Murray, who is not here tonight. But if you have a link or maybe a show suggestion that you would like to send us, feel free to do so. Email at weatherbrains.com.
All right. Well, let's see here. I'm checking the clock on the wall here. We got time to do a quick weather.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We're doing this on the 29th of January, 2018. Let's start with Rick Smith. Rick, how's the weather in Oklahoma?
It is relatively mild, windy, and the key word is very, very dry. We've got parts of our area where it's been over 100 days since they've had measurable precipitation. So the drought continues to worsen. And our peak wildfire season is usually February into March. And we've already had a lot of active wildfire days in the past couple of weeks. So that's going to be our story. The long-term model output doesn't really show any promises for precipitation in our area for a long time. So the drought and the wildfire situation is going to be the story around here for a while, unfortunately.
Kevin, same deal in your place there?
Yeah, parts of my Western DMA are under extreme and expanding category from the U.S. Drought Monitor, so that's going to get worse. In the short term, next few days, well, by the weekend, the models here were, I should punch it up so I would talk it, but as far as this cold air that would come for the weekend, there's a huge discrepancy on the models at this point, and this is 6 days out. But just glancing at the GFS Moss here by Sunday has us a high of only 33, but we're kind of the question is will it be a glancing blow for us? The heart of it goes into the eastern part of the country, but will we get enough of it here to make a big difference and have a high of only 33, or will it kind of cheat a little eastward? I'm betting on more a little eastward at this point, but it's only Monday. That was a terrible discussion that I just gave right there.
No, that was fluid, and we stayed with you. So I'm going to say, Marshall, looks like Marshall's been working out. Marshall, can you show the ladies the way to the weather map there?
I've actually not been. Man, it's just this tight fitting T-shirt. Actually, it's no. I used to work out quite a bit, James, but it's when you got a 10 and a 14-year-old playing basketball and travel volleyball. Those days they're few and far between now. So,
brother, I have been down that path. I hear you.
Yes.
So we are coming off the 4-year anniversary of Snowmageddon in Atlanta and Birmingham. My eye is still twitching.
Is it really 4 years? Wow.
Yeah, because I remember it well because it was a few weeks later. It was my AMS meeting as president here in Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah, that was crazy. But Atlanta's nice and quiet, I assume now.
Yeah, we're very sunny today. Temperatures in the 50s, may get up around 60 tomorrow. There is a little bit of a moderate, some parts of the state, they're in sort of abnormally dry to moderate drought conditions as well. Had a decent amount of rainfall on Sunday, and I was driving from Knoxville, Tennessee back to Atlanta, coming from a volleyball tournament, in fact. So that might put a little dent in, but I don't see any appreciable or sort of substantial rainfall here over the next 5 to 7 days in Atlanta as well. So we'll remain relatively dry, but somewhat mild to normal.
All right, Aubrey, what you got up in Harrisonburg?
Well, catching up on everything, we got a cold front coming in tonight, so a little bit of a dusting possible in some areas, but we're kind of a little up and down this week. But we're kind of we're dealing with a drought, but definitely not anywhere near what some of you guys are dealing with. We have had at least a little bit of measurable rain, but we're kind of teetering with the moderate drought range. And just like Rick, as you said, our wildfire season starts mid-February. So if we don't get any sort of a coastal storm or anything like that, then we definitely could be in trouble as we head into February as well. But we're kind of just a little bit of that roller coaster across the east. And, who knows, with some cold air coming in over the next couple of weeks, we may end up kind of on that fringe, on that southern fringe. We'll see if we get the full effect or maybe just kind of that moderate effect.
Awesome. Brian, you got some drought conditions creeping into the deep south where you are there.
Yeah, it's I said the other day on the TV that I hate drought because it's one of those things that kind of creeps up on you. We beat the drought back last year in the first 6 months of 2017, but with a dry November 17 and a dry December 17 and now a rather dry January 2018, that drought is beginning to get up into the moderate and up into the middle classes, which is severe drought. So got to watch those water tables, that's for sure. And we don't have any real big events on the horizon yet.
Yep. And Nate, I'll let you talk about Chicago. And as you do that, somebody's got to take over here because I must cross the hall and go to Studio A. Marshall, thank you. You're my hero.
I've got to run too because I've got about 3% battery left and I didn't bring my charger.
Okay.
I'm probably going to be popping off too.
Everybody go follow Marshall on the Twitter, watch Weather Geeks, and check out his Facebook page. What else? UGA, what do we need to plug here?
Yeah, no, just at Dr. Shepard 2013 on Twitter. And I've got a public Facebook page out there as well where I put a little bit more information out. So see you guys.
All right. See you, Marshall.
Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Nate, the floor belongs to you.
All
Hey,
right.
Nate, you can keep the floor, but let me do my pick because I'm not in my studio, so I got to go get ready for the 10, if that's all right with you. I love task-specific apps, and this one is called Deep Weather, and it just takes you right to any area forecast discussion across the country.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that.
Deep Weather. And I am, one of the production people just came and went, 6 minutes. So I'll see you guys.
Peace. Bye. Weather here in Chicago was cold. Actually landed at O'Hare and had some snow flurries, and off and on throughout the afternoon was cool. Looking at the snow coming in off of the lake and actually seeing, sometimes if you've got a camera position that's high enough, you can sort of see from cloud base level and look down and you can see the rain or snow hitting the ground. And here it was snow hitting the lake. It was really kind of cool. No drought to speak of here in northeastern Illinois, but back home in North Carolina, we're dealing with a moderate drought. Although a good soaking rain over the last 36 to 48 hours has been really, really nice to help tamp that down. We'll see how long that lasts. So let's talk about picks of the week. Aubrey, you've got a little bit of newscast action happening behind you here shortly. So let's start with you.
All right. So my pick is, we've had Kim Cross on and talked about her book, but I did read it on vacation, What Stands in a Storm. And I was not expecting to read it so fast. In a matter of couple of hours, I was done. And a captivating book. If you're not a crier, you will cry. So that was a very good book. And so a very good read. And of course, Brian and James are kind of profiled a bit in it. And it goes into a lot of great detail behind the April 2011 tornado outbreak event. So a very good book. And I also want to give a little shout out to this website for the ladies who are listening, downtown10.com. We found it in our female group. Someone posted it and they have these little weather jewelry. So you can see my earrings if you have video. It's a little silver cloud with like these little raindrops hanging down. And I've got a couple of them. They have like an umbrella and a lightning kind of set of earrings. So for the ladies out there, downtown10.com if you want some weather jewelry.
Very cool. I actually have weather themed socks on that I will not show you at this time because it would involve, But anyway, Brian Peters, a pick of the week from you, sir.
I was running through some web pages and I ran across a link to the solar eclipse caused a bow wave in the Earth's atmosphere. I find it very fascinating. I'm not sure I understand it completely, but it's quite fascinating to see the bow wave that they show that occurred with the solar eclipse last year. So interesting read. Again, I don't understand it all, but it is very interesting to see how it all is all connected.
All right. Rick, a pick of the week from you in Norman, Oklahoma.
Yes, sir. In keeping with my weather roundup discussion there, pick of the week is going to involve wildfires, and FEMA's got a great website for wildfire preparation. People don't think a lot about, preparing for wildfires, but definitely if you're in an area that's prone to that, there are things you can do in advance to make your house, your home, your property less susceptible to wildfire, and certainly things you can do with your family to be ready in case it happens. So my pick of the week is the FEMA website on wildfire.
All right. My pick of the week is a Twitter account. It's the Penn State Radar Meteorology Group, and they do some really cool stuff. They've just a couple of weeks ago, they were taking out a mobile, upward pointing mobile radar system and analyzing the fall rates of raindrops and snowflakes and that sort of thing. Really fascinating stuff. They take a little bit of a deeper, geekier approach to radar data. And if you're a radar geek like me, if you would or want to be, it's a really cool follow to keep track. Of course, we'll put all of these on the WeatherBrains website after the show is posted. You'll be able to get links to all of that directly there from that website. Rick or Brian, any final comments before we wrap it up on this Monday, this last Monday of January?
I'm clear.
We talked about AMS a couple of times and earlier in the episode and another episode, but I just want to give a quick shout out. I don't have all their names, but I got to meet a lot of students at AMS who are avid WeatherBrains listeners. So you know who you are. Thanks for listening. And it's always really cool to meet the students and talk to them and know that, and it's scary at the same time to know that we are truly influencing young minds. So it's a big responsibility, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, well, this is the All About the Weather netcast, the original All About the Weather netcast. WeatherBrains would normally produce it on Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. You can find all the information, including about the hosts, our guests, upcoming shows. All of that is all available on weatherbrains.com on the internet. You can find the podcast in its audio form in your favorite podcast app, including the iTunes library. I'd love to have your comments. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and email at weatherbrains.com. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, I am not James Spann. Good night and God bless.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Sorry I was late.
Good to see you.
Yep. Y'all take care.
Take care.
And we have 14 people still watching. Thank you, guys. Great to have Dr. Shepard on the show this week. That was a ton of fun. We're going to sign off here. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you all for watching. Have a marvelous weekend. God bless.